What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our channel, your source for breaking celebrity news and exclusive stories. I'm your host, and today we're bringing you a story that sent shockwaves through the religious community and beyond. We're talking about legendary televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, a man who's been preaching to millions for over 5 decades, and the terrifying morning that nearly ended it all. What happened behind closed doors at the Swaggart family home will leave you speechless. This isn't just another celebrity health scare. This is a story of faith, family, and the power of prayer that played out in real time. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and let's dive into this exclusive breakdown of what really happened. Picture this, it's an ordinary morning in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The sun is just rising, casting soft light through the curtains of the Swaggart family home. Jimmy Swaggart, the 89-year-old legendary televangelist, had just finished his morning devotions, something he'd done religiously for decades. As always, he sat in his study with his Bible open, sipping warm coffee and softly humming one of his favorite hymns. This was his routine, his sacred time with God before starting another day of ministry. But Frances Swaggart, his devoted wife of over 60 years, noticed something wasn't right. Jimmy looked pale, his movements slower than usual. When she gently asked if he was feeling okay, he gave her that tired smile and said, "Just a little heaviness in my chest, honey. I'll be fine." Those words would haunt Frances for days to come. Within minutes, everything changed. As Jimmy stood to walk toward the hallway, his body suddenly stiffened. He clutched his chest, gasped for air, and collapsed right there in front of his wife. Can you imagine? Frances let out a cry that echoed through the house. Panic rushed over her as she dropped to the floor, calling out his name. "Jimmy! Jimmy! Can you hear me?" His eyes were half open, his breathing shallow and labored. With trembling hands, she dialed 911, pleading for help while holding her husband's hand tightly. The woman who had stood by this man through every triumph and controversy was now watching him fight for his life on their living room floor. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but for Frances, it felt like a lifetime. Paramedics worked quickly, checking vitals and stabilizing Jimmy while Frances stood nearby, silently praying. "Lord, please, not now," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Donnies Swaggart, their son and a prominent figure in the ministry himself, arrived just as paramedics were wheeling Jimmy into the ambulance. His face went pale seeing his father's condition. There was no time for questions, just a rushed explanation from the medics. "We believe it's a heart attack." At the hospital, doctors confirmed their worst fears. Jimmy Swaggart had suffered what they described as a mild yet dangerous heart attack. The next few hours would be critical. Nurses moved swiftly, prepping him for immediate intervention while doctors tried to ease the family's concerns. But no amount of medical explanation could settle the storm inside Frances' heart. She sat in the waiting area, holding onto her Bible, rocking back and forth as she prayed. Donnie paced the hallway silently. His father wasn't just a preacher to him, he was a foundation, a living testimony of God's grace. Seeing him so weak and vulnerable was something he had never prepared for. Staff from the ministry began arriving one by one, some crying, others in shock. The news hadn't reached the public yet. Everything was being kept quiet while the family prayed and waited. Inside the ICU, Jimmy was unconscious, connected to wires and machines monitoring every heartbeat, every breath. The sight was unbearable for Frances. She sat beside his bed, her hands gently touching his, whispering softly, "You're strong, Jimmy, and God's not done with you yet." She tried to be brave, but the fear in her eyes said it all. Outside the room, Donnie stood staring at the floor, replaying memories, old revivals, nights on the road, childhood moments of watching his father preach with fire and passion. Now that same man was lying helpless, fragile, and quiet. The doctors gave no promises, only hope. And hope was what kept the family going through those dark hours. Meanwhile, word began spreading behind the scenes. Members of the church's inner circle were notified. Prayer chains were activated. Trusted elders were called in for spiritual support. Some flew in from out of state, not to visit the hospital directly, but just to be close, to pray, and to be ready for whatever news might come. Frances refused to leave Jimmy's side. She sat in the dark room, reading the Psalms aloud in a soft, trembling voice. Her prayer wasn't loud or fancy, just a whisper of faith. Lord, heal him. Let him open his eyes and call on your name again. There were no cameras, no interviews, no statements to the public. This was not the time for headlines. This was the time for prayer, for family, for holding on to faith when everything seemed to be falling apart. While Jimmy fought for his life in the hospital, Frances made a heartbreaking discovery back at their home. She had returned briefly to collect a few things, his favorite devotional, his reading glasses, hoping he'd ask for them again. It was then that she stepped into his private study. Everything was as he had left it that morning. His Bible lay open on the desk, pages marked with sticky notes and handwritten scriptures in the margins. A yellow notepad sat beside it, a pen still uncapped. As Frances picked up the notepad, tears filled her eyes. At the top of the page was a title, When the Heart Breaks, the Spirit Speaks. It was an unfinished sermon, raw, rough, but undeniably powerful. Line by line, she read her husband's scattered thoughts. Words he hadn't yet shared with the world, but had clearly been preparing in prayer. One part read, Sometimes the loudest message from heaven comes not in shouting, but in silence. And when the heart is broken, the spirit becomes still enough to hear what God has been trying to say. It was as if Jimmy had unknowingly left her a message of comfort, not just for her, but for every soul now praying for him. That evening, back at the hospital, she brought the pages with her. She sat beside his bed and began reading the words out loud, believing with all her heart that he could hear her. 3 nights had passed since Jimmy's heart attack. The mood remained heavy, though small improvements gave the family comfort. Frances had hardly slept, staying beside Jimmy's bed every moment. Then, just as dawn began to rise on the 4th morning, something changed. A nurse on the night shift was the first to notice Jimmy's fingers move. At first, she thought it was a reflex, but then his eyes opened, slowly, uncertainly, but they opened. Frances, who had dozed off with her head near his arm, lifted her head and saw his eyes looking back at her. She froze, not knowing if she was dreaming. Then came the voice, soft, hoarse, barely above a whisper, Frances. It was only her name, but it was everything. Tears poured down her face as she clutched his hand, kissing it over and over. Jimmy, you're awake. Oh, thank you, Jesus. You're awake. Doctors were stunned. Though they'd been doing everything medically possible, they admitted this turn had come faster than expected. One physician said quietly to Frances, he's a strong man, but more than that, maybe he's being held up by something stronger than us all. Over the next few hours, Jimmy began speaking more. Simple words at first, thank you, I'm okay, water. But every word was like a miracle to the family. Then, with his voice still weak, he said something none of them would ever forget, I heard the prayers. I felt them. Even when I couldn't speak, I knew they were carrying me. 2 days after waking up, Jimmy made a simple request, I want to send a message, just a short one, to the people. Despite doctors' orders for complete rest, a small audio recording was made from his hospital bed. No cameras, no music, just his fragile yet unmistakable voice. His message was simple but powerful, to every brother and sister who prayed for me, I want you to know I felt it. Even when I was silent, I knew you were speaking to God on my behalf. I don't remember every hour I was unconscious, but I remember peace. That peace came from your prayers, from your faith, and from the God we've all trusted through the years. He continued, his voice cracking with emotion, I've preached for over 60 years, but these past few days taught me something even deeper. When your voice is gone and your strength is gone, God still hears the whispers of your soul. He heard mine, and he heard yours too. The recording was just under 2 minutes, but when it was quietly posted to the church's official page, thousands began listening and weeping. Comments poured in from around the world, with many saying they'd never felt the presence of God through a recording like they did in that moment. This story isn't just about a celebrity health scare. It's about the power of faith, the strength of family, and the incredible bond between a preacher and his community that transcended physical boundaries. Jimmy Swaggart's heart attack could have been the end of his story. Instead, it became a testimony to the power of prayer and the resilience of the human spirit. From that hospital bed, with his voice weak but his spirit strong, he delivered what many are calling one of his most powerful messages ever. Today, Jimmy continues his recovery, surrounded by family and supported by millions of prayers from around the world. His journey reminds us that sometimes our greatest messages come not from our strength, but from our weakness. What do you think about this incredible story of faith and recovery? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more exclusive celebrity news and inspiring stories. Until next time, this is Host Name, reminding you that sometimes the most powerful voices come from the quietest moments.